Hi, Raza. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit of my thoughts on career development from Canada. And I'm enjoying connecting with you in Pakistan. You asked if I could talk a little bit about how I've maximized career guidance or contributed to maximizing career guidance and development with my international experience, and wondering if I would share some insights from that journey. And so when I reflected on this question, I thought that the main takeaway for me has been not to impose cultural expectations or norms from one culture to the next. I think North Americans, Western people have been rightly criticized for taking what has been developed in the West, or has worked effectively in the West, and trying to transplant that into other places around the world. And in my experience, I've personally found that that's just not helpful. And so I've learned to listen and to consult, and to build capacity, and all of that with a great deal of humility, because I've realized that I don't know anything when I'm outside of my own context. And so it's been a lifelong lesson for me. I've been in the field for 42 years at this point, and in the last 20 years, I've had the privilege of working in the field of career development, doing training or consulting or speaking on 6 continents in more than 74 countries, and in doing that have continually held to the notion of building capacity, and trying to make myself redundant, trying to not create long-term contracts. So not so good for business, but good for the soul. It's felt really good to be able to equip people, sometimes in the beginning, because my main language is English. I've done the training in English. I've maybe used some American or British or Australian resources, and been able to give some foundational training to people all over the world, in Indonesia and Zimbabwe, places where the notion, China, where the notion of career development has been quite new to be formed. And so what my approach has always been to go in and work with local champions, work with local cultural informants, people who are excited about career development, and do what I can to build them up so that they in turn can do some training, bringing in their own cultural norms, bringing in training materials in their own language, so that they're able to build capacity amongst locals. I think as well, we've taken a very broad definition of career. So when I think about career, I don't think about just work. I think about all of our significant life roles: being a parent, being a caregiver to aging parents, community service work that we might do, being a student. So all of those roles together are involved in career. And so when we think about that, then career development can very reasonably be lifelong. We can be introducing small children in schools to the notion of career development, not asking them what they're going to be when they grow up, because the world is changing so much. So many of those jobs aren't even invented yet. But instead, knowing what competencies they're going to need, and starting to develop those competencies very young. And so that's also where I think that it's important for us to work beyond our silos, that we are career development professionals, but we can work with the primary educators that are in schools. We can work with the primary HR professionals that are in organizations, and we can be equipping them to have career conversations, or to develop career competencies. But we also can go in and partner with them, doing workshops or doing training. And so when we think about those partnerships, those logical partnerships, then career development as a lifelong endeavor might involve career development professionals equipping teachers. We're developing some training right now pre-service teachers, teachers in training, just so that they'll be able to have career conversations in their classrooms, whatever they're teaching. We also can be doing training for career development professionals. We can be partnering with governments. We can be partnering with other institutions that can work together to provide career support. So I think that the big learning is to partner, to be a partner, to be a consultant, to be able to do our part, but to recognize that there are so many other people that can be contributing to one's career development. You also asked me about the sustainability of career guidance. You mentioned that it's achieved when it's intertwined into the fabric of a country's policies. I love that phrasing. And asked if I could share some insights on that. So I think that when we look at funding for career development, that is always going to shift according to the needs and the funding priorities of a particular time. As I mentioned, I've been doing this work for 42 years. And so I've watched a real focus on youth at various times. And it comes and goes, it ebbs and flows. I've seen a focus at one point on women reentering the workforce when it was less common for women to be working after they had children. I've seen an emphasis on supported employment for people with disabilities. I've seen a focus on integrating newcomers to our country, immigrants, a focus in Canada on equipping and more fully involving our Indigenous peoples into the workforce. And so at various times, there'll be policy that aligns with other government priorities and initiatives, and career is one piece of it, and there'll be funding for it. If we wait for the funding and think, oh, I've got this great idea, but the government isn't asking for that kind of program right now, we may have a very long wait, or we may be preparing for something that was funded last year, but it's not going to be funded next year. I think instead, we recognize that career development is needed regardless of funding priorities or a particular economic situation. Career development support is always needed. And so it's looking at what are the funding opportunities, where is the money being allocated, and how can we piggyback on that? How can we partner to be able to support career development? So, for example, we can bring policymakers together with career development practitioners. One of the really great ways I've seen that done is through the international symposia that are held every couple of years. There was one in Norway last year, one in Korea a couple of years before that, the United States a couple of years before that. And through ICCDPP, they hold the symposia, but there's a preparation of teams beforehand. And the teams include government policymakers, career development professionals, researchers, sometimes employers. And so these teams form country teams, and they work together on figuring out what their priorities are, doing a little bit of an environmental scan of what's going on in their country right now. And then they go prepared to report that. But the really valuable thing at the symposium is the learning from other countries. And so if you've got policymakers right on your team at the table, then they're learning from other countries and seeing some policies showcased and celebrated. And they go back to their own countries and say, I think that would be something worth funding. So it's a way of countries learning from each other. I think as well, when we think about sustainability, I've always worked from a real spirit of abundance and shared what I have. And I've always been blessed with learning more from other people than I've ever had to give. And so I think that if we can have that spirit of abundance and we share what we have, then people are able to build on that and improve it and tailor it and customize it and make it more relevant for their own context. But in turn, we get so much information back and so much knowledge back that's going to help improve our services. So I'd really like to encourage people to stop reinventing the wheel, stop building things in silos, stop starting from scratch. And if we're able to share the information that has already been created. I know that that's not always possible, and I know that there's proprietary interests and copyright, and I respect all of that. But if we can partner with people who have created material and they can see value in sharing that material, then we're able to build from a solid foundation and take it to the next level. And then somebody else takes it to the next level again. I did some work in Saudi Arabia a few years ago, and they were building standards and guidelines and other tools for career development practitioners in that country. Now, they had looked around the world and found Australia's standards and guidelines seemed like a good fit for them as a starting place. So they hired a firm from Australia. But Australia's standards and guidelines at that point had been based on the Canadian standards and guidelines. So that Australian team in turn hired Canadians to go and help them with the training and the rollout of it. And that kind of a partnership resulted in a wonderfully customized, Saudi unique set of standards and guidelines, but that had been started from a foundation that had been shown to work, had been shown to be effective in other parts of the world. So it could be customized, it could be made to be culturally appropriate, but it didn't have to start from scratch. Now, there's a danger, going back to the first thing I said about imposing cultural norms or expectations. So I think that anything that we borrow from other contexts or other cultures really has to go through localization. It really has to go through a process of being vetted by people that understand the local context and say, this works here, but this doesn't. And you know what? Something's completely missing. So we need to build in another piece that is going to make it work in this culture. I have a very small company. I've always started small. And I think sometimes we wait for big funding or big initiatives or big support. But if we start small, then we can build something, pilot it, maybe get, some local champions behind it, get a little bit of funding, maybe from a local business person or a foundation, and get something running. And then we would be able to prove that it works, do some evaluation, get some effectiveness stats. And then from there, we can go on and build something bigger. I think as well, we need to build as a profession if we're going to be sustainable. And so partly we're doing that right now, Raza. We're connecting across continents and talking about career development and learning from each other. And I think international associations have a really big role to play there. So you and I met at the Asia Pacific Career Development Association conference many years ago, and have stayed in touch since. We know people from the International Association of Educational and Vocational Guidance, and have connections there all over the world. The National Career Development Association in the States has wide-reaching connections. And so when we are building as a profession, if we can connect with other professional bodies, there's wonderful work being done in India, for example. And what they've done there is really localized a model that works. There's many ways of doing career development there, but I'm thinking of the Jiva model, and they've also coined the notion of livelihood planning rather than career planning, because that's something that resonates locally. So I think if we build as a profession with advanced education, equipping leaders, consulting with governments, then that's going to contribute to the sustainability of career guidance and keeping it as a funding priority. You also noted that it's Careers Month right now in Canada. This is November when we're speaking, and we don't have a day here, we have a month. And so you said, how can career scholars, practitioners, and professionals amplify the career profession in transforming lives nationally and globally? And so what I wanted to say about our Career Month, the learning that we've had over the years, is that you really need to not try to do everything. You need to choose a focus. I can remember being part of a team a few years ago, and when we expanded from a career week to a career month, we had just amazing big ideas that we thought we'd be able to accomplish. And we ended up being a bit too scattered and trying to be too many things at the same time. And so this year, there's one theme, and the theme is On the Move, Stories of Career Resiliency. And that's a way of collecting evidence. So there's a website, we have a permanent website, careermonth.ca. And so resources will stay up there year round. And this year, the focus is on collecting those stories of career resiliency, and people can submit their stories as examples. And so that would be a way, if we're trying to get the notion of career development as being important, as mattering, into, sort of getting media attention, getting government policy attention, then one of the ways of doing it is this type of qualitative research where there's a collection of stories that are inspiring stories. And in the middle of a pandemic, more than ever, of course, resiliency, career resiliency is a really important concept. And so that's the focus this year. The other thing that we've done in Canada and might be useful for people in other parts of the world is we've started to pay a lot of attention to learning how to talk to the media and learning how to talk to policymakers and government officials. And so there's been formal training that many of the career development leaders in Canada have participated in order to be better at communicating and reaching out and getting the attention of media and government. So that's something as well that can contribute. And Careers Month is just a way of increasing awareness. When we were talking about Careers Month, you said it would be really great, and I know I've heard this from other people as well, if the United Nations would designate an International Career Day or an International Day of Career Development or something like that, and asked what I thought about that. And I've had this conversation with other people recently too, and I think it would be lovely. Of course, it would be wonderful to have our profession recognized by the UN. But I think sometimes it's better to just build it and they will come. And so there would be nothing stopping you and I or a few of our friends from saying, let's choose a particular day and call that the International Day of Careers or International Career Day. And then we launch things like a website or a media blitz or, start to gather resources. And so at some point, I think, then there would be enough of enough international interest that we could then go to the UN and say, look, this is what we've been doing. We would love your endorsement of it and, to have broader reach. So I think sometimes when we wait for people to come to us or we go to them with a plan that involves a lot of work on their part, or they can't really see the value or that the infrastructure is there to support it, then those ideas just stay as ideas. But I think sometimes when we, just a few people get together and do something and then demonstrate that there's value in this, that's how associations are formed. That's how, major institutions have been started by a few people getting together and thinking it's a good idea. The other thought I had when I was pondering this notion of an International Career Day is, what if we just piggybacked on some of the existing days? So I went on to the UN website and just looked at today, for example. It's November 10th. And today is the World Science Day for Peace and Development. And I thought, what if career people were to create a website and a calendar and look at all of the existing international days and then create a resource page that linked careers and career resources and training opportunities to those particular themes. And so there'd be lots of careers related to the World Science Day for Peace and Development. We could be looking at peacekeeping careers. We could be looking at international development careers. We could be looking at science careers. We could be looking at globalization. So there's a lot of words in there that we could link careers to. And so in that way, career development people could be providing a service to the UN by saying, what we're going to do is expand the resources that you have attached to each of these days. And we'll provide a website for that so that you could link to our website for each of these international days. So instead of getting one International Career Day, what we could do is be embedded in every single international day. November 5th, for example, was World Tsunami Awareness Day. So there'd be lots of careers related to tsunami awareness. There would be the proactive, the scientific careers that can predict when a tsunami is going to occur. But there would also be all of the environmental protection careers, the cleanup careers, the restoration, the safety, the humanity, rescue kinds of careers. So there'd be lots of options linked to this one day that exists. So that's just a thought to flip the notion of having an International Career Day and have every day being an International Career Day, because we're piggybacking on these other ideas. Finally, you asked me about a quote from Mr. Anthony Mann of the OECD. And you said that he said, never before in human history has career guidance been so important. And you asked me to reflect on what he said. And he said that, from what I recall, before the pandemic. So I would expand that now to say, never before has career guidance been as important as it is right now when we add the pandemic onto the other things that are going on. But here are a few reasons that I think that career guidance is so important right now. We have more choice, more career choices than ever before at any time in history. And that's global. That's not just local. So I recall a time years ago when I was going up the Mekong Delta in Cambodia. And I remember looking at I was on the Mekong River, sorry, not in the Delta, but on the river. And I remember looking at the homes that were along the bank of the river, and they were really quite simple dwellings. They were made out of pillars, like tree logs, and they had a grass roof, and they were an open design, and so they really didn't look modern or very sophisticated at all. And then as dusk came and night fell, I realized that every one of those homes had a color TV in it, and they were watching international shows. So wherever you are in the world these days, you're exposed through the internet, through satellite television. You are exposed to more ways of being and more ways of doing things and more potential occupations than ever before. And where there's that much choice, it's hard to make decisions. And guidance helps. Having a navigator along on that journey helps. The other thing that's happening right now is that we're going through a time of unprecedented, rapid, unpredictable change. And any time that there's change, that the typical way of doing things is no longer valid, then there's a need for guidance. We also are in a time of skill shortages, ironically, even in the midst of unemployment. And so there's a mismatch between the skills that are available, the people that are available to work, and the skills that are needed for some of the work that needs doing. And anytime that there's a mismatch or that there's a skill shortage, there's a need for guidance. There's a need for getting more people into the workforce than were there before. There's a need for helping people figure out how to get the training that they might need, what training might be required in order to be successful and sustainable at work. And then finally, we have an unprecedented level, other than currently right at the moment in the pandemic when people are grounded, but we have an unprecedented global mobility. And so that also creates a need for guidance as people are trying to look at the transferability of their education into another context. They're trying to look at the occupations that might be needed, what are the expectations of the culture they're going to, what are the nuances in the workplace and the expectations from employers. And so all of those things together contribute to the reason, I believe, that Anthony Mann would have said, never before in human history has career guidance been so important. And so speaking to all of you as career professionals, you have a really important role to play wherever you might be in the world right now. And to any of you who are listening, who are policymakers, you have such an important role to play in creating the policies and the avenues for people to get the career supports that they need. This impacts our economies. It impacts individuals in terms of being able to support their families. It impacts mental health and well-being, and it impacts the ability of a country to innovate and stay current on the world stage. So Raza, I just really commend the work that you're doing. You're doing important work in bringing people together and different ideas together from all across the globe. I've run across you in many different countries, and I just really, really admire what you're doing. So thanks so much for the opportunity to speak with you this evening.